I wonder how our lovely tea-drinking neighbors across the pond are doing.
Mandarin. The rain.
Oh, they're on the brink of a civil conflict fighting each other. Who would have thought? We did. We actually predicted this many years ago. It's called the divide and conquer agenda. As, of course, there's a diminishing population that is indigenous there and a brand new one that's growing and replacing the old one. And who would have thought that there would have been tensions here? As, of course, what we're seeing in the United Kingdom is probably going to happen to all of Europe soon and then coming here to the United States. We're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more, all here on this independent media broadcast, as I think it's more important than ever that we should be hyper-focusing on this issue to try to prevent it from engulfing the rest of the Western world. This as Elon Musk even took to his own social media company and said, quote, "Civil war is inevitable," highlighting some of the crazy videos coming from the United Kingdom. As Ashley St. Clair says, the effects of mass migration and open borders is what's going on, as Libs of TikTok just details the utter total madness amongst racial tensions that are at an all-time low in the United Kingdom. As Alex Jones came out and said that the government has set up the country to collapse in a total police state. This is just recently a town in Yorkshire, England, descended into total chaos as people protesting some of the latest events that they were very unhappy about after 3 young children lost their lives, specifically sought out a hotel that was housing asylum seekers, aka illegal immigrants that of course were shipped into the United Kingdom, as they had open battles with the local police department there that they were able to push back. And then of course they tried to burn down the Holiday Inn, which was the immigration center. As there's multiple reports of serious injuries, a bunch of arrests, and of course a hotel that was almost burnt down. As these types of clashes are becoming more and more common in the United Kingdom, as of course many people fear just an all-out civil conflict unfolding there, which some people believe we are already on the brink of. All, of course, as these scattered riots could just be the beginning of a lot more riots, a lot more fighting, a lot more civil strife happening internally in the United Kingdom that has been programmed, in my opinion, has been ratcheting up, has been heating up to this larger kind of tumultuous moment that is really something that is very difficult to go back from. As, of course, in response to the local English population rioting, the ever so growing Muslim population in the United Kingdom also is organizing and in some reports retaliating against some of the larger actions that are being made against them. As there's now the creation of a Muslim Defense League that is mobilizing in places like Bolton in the United Kingdom. As the UK is finding a lot of suspects with a lot of very pointy and dangerous tools on them that are, of course, banned. This says clearly there are a lot of tensions building up between the local population and the Muslim population in the United Kingdom, as the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom just took to the national stage to guarantee that the people creating chaos here will be held responsible for their actions. As, of course, I'm kind of curious if he's going to be going after the big tech social media companies, the government there, the UN organizations, the NGOs that organized a lot of these larger kind of migrations that clearly there is some kind of civil strife about. And of course, no, he didn't. As it's pretty fair to say, with the history of the United Kingdom and the way that it's treating a lot of its local citizens, that there will be a disproportionate response that, of course, will only trigger more outrage and anger from the local population there.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests. You will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online.
Now, the online bit was pretty interesting, as of course it's important to note here that a lot of political commentators and people also just kind of representing the facts that are inconvenient to the state have been previously politically prosecuted in the United Kingdom. As of course there's other individuals that were charged for pre-crime-like activities that the UK government deemed unsatisfactory to them and preemptively arrested people before they were able to commit any kind of potential crime. as already 90 people have been arrested all across the United Kingdom and related to a lot of these street clashes and larger fights in the streets, as Sky News is describing these protests as protests between, quote, anti-Islamic groups and, quote, anti-racism groups. That's literally how they described what's happening here. As the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has even just canceled his own vacation to deal with the larger tensions that are boiling up and building up in his country, as of course, let's not forget that all of this happened not because people just decided to be hateful all of a sudden, not just because people just decided to be angry at a whole group of individuals, but because there was one particular event that conveniently a lot of people aren't bringing up here or talking about. And that was an event that led to 3 little girls losing their lives, multiple others injured seriously after a knife attack from a Rwandan that sparked off this entire kind of protest, counter-protest, and now the larger clashes and street fights that we're seeing unfolding in the United Kingdom. This as organizers of some of these protests, in response to the boiling over of these tensions, or even individuals who previously were sent to solitary confinement, arrested, charged. One of them just fled the United Kingdom as he's facing contempt of court proceedings, as he was just arrested this Sunday on counter-terrorism powers, released on unconditional bail, and has since then decided to, of course, flee the United Kingdom, as he is expected to face more charges against him, as the media is accusing him of being one of the main radicalizers here, as the more that he gets punished, with some people viewing this as unjust punishment, the more he grows as an influential individual in all of these matters. This, as it's fair to say, that there's a lot of individuals stoking fear right now as the Middle East Eye reports on how the Muslim communities are organizing, as just in, according to Sky News, mosques in England will now be offered new emergency security after several mosques in the UK have been targeted. As I think it's fair to say that immigration plays a vital role in this entire matter and wouldn't be as prevalent if the situation wasn't just as egregious as it is right now, as many NGOs and UN organizations are literally importing giant foreign populations into the United Kingdom and other places in Europe and other places in the United States, in all of the western parts of the world that are dealing with significant population decline. And historically, whenever you have a new population of individuals moving into a new territory, there's always civil strife. There's always kind of tension between the new population and the old population, as there's particular events that are played up on, and preferential treatment and tax dollars, resources, jobs, opportunities that are taken away from the local population in order to, of course, grant opportunities for the new population. And this is why we have even seen the Koch brothers weaponize immigration and previously describe how it's great for them. It's great for the multinational corporations that, of course, gets to import new labor. The cost of labor goes down. The price of housing goes up, since, of course, there's more people looking for homes, less homes available for the local population, and therefore that's just one example of many examples to why a lot of people are saying, hey, this situation might not be that fair, as, of course, there's also legal and judicial cases, specifically when it comes to the local populations being hurt by the new population that are being obfuscated, that are being ignored, that are not really talked about, as there are a couple incidences of the new population hurting the old population and getting a slap on the wrist, and other kind of egregious cases where the old population does something to offend the new one, and then they literally get thrown to jail to never come out of it ever again. This is, it's fair to say that there are some larger cultural clashes here, as there's a lot of differences between the new population and the old population, their kind of practices, their religions, their cultures, their diets, their foods, and a lot of that times, specifically with the new forms of immigration, there's not a lot of assimilation. There's not a lot of individuals that are willing to, of course, forego their old practices in order to better kind of assimilate to the practices of the territory and the country that they're in. And one of the biggest, starkest differences between some of these individuals is, of course, their view on women, women's rights, and, of course, the respect of women's bodily autonomy, as there are things like grooming gangs in the United Kingdom, that are an absolutely awful thing that also have, of course, spurred on to other places in Europe that have also opened up their borders to these NGOs and UN organizations that are influxing these huge populations into them. As statistics specifically, what happens to women in these local populations is being deliberately obfuscated to the point where people are not able to see, and if they do, are punished for, of course, calling out the obvious problems and the cultural clashes that are unfolding here that build up a lot of this strife, build up a lot of this tension that sadly is not being addressed in an open and honest way. As in Germany, politicians are even being punished after publishing statistics specifically highlighting a lot of these kind of cultural differences from Middle Eastern and African countries that do not respect women and practice that disrespect with the obfuscation and protection of the establishment. As of course, it's important to note here that populations are being played off against each other, and there are bigoted and hateful individuals on both sides of this conflict. Both of them believe that they are correct when it comes to their kind of assessments, their culture, their practices, their beliefs, and their religion. As of course, we have to try to understand this from other points of view other than just our own, as a lot of the new population believes that they're helping the sinners and the rotting culture of the West through, of course, more pure ways and intentions that, of course, is the ultimate truth to them. As it's important to note here, and we have to try to understand here that both sides of these issues believe that they're the righteous one, believe that they're doing things for the right reasons, believe that they are protecting themselves and their communities against the other that they view as the aggressor here. When in all actual reality, there are particular kind of events being played up on against these local populations to fight each other. And especially in a day and age where we have echo chambers on social media, where we have hyperbolic news coverage, when we have the obfuscation and clear prosecution of one political side and another that is promoted, paid for, and of course assisted every step of the way, there is a clear kind of injustice here that both of these groups are perceiving that are being weaponized and played up against each other. As with the current trajectory of that we're on, the new population is set to soon replace the old population. And when one group becomes a majority and another a minority and that group switches, there is a lot of problems ahead with, of course, that particular group. As you add this to the larger factors of some kind of economic strife, pain, and consequences, and you have a situation that, of course, is going to be disastrous. As there's a lot of reports of hammers and other spiky tools being used at protest. And the more victimized one group becomes and hears about it, and of course is highlighted in the media, on social media, on the corporate media, the more anger, the more tensions will brew. Now, you add that to the factor that there's also a larger fight brewing inside of the Middle East that will also divide a bunch of people, that will also piss off a bunch of people, especially in the Muslim community. And in my opinion, you have an absolute powder keg as the local populations are being replaced in the Western world, and just naturally, that's pretty chaotic in itself. Now, you add that to the larger economic strife. You add that to geopolitical tensions expanding, especially inside of the Middle East. And to me, you have an absolute recipe for disaster for not just Europe, but also for the United States. That also, through the United Nations and NGOs, is replacing the local population here. As in America, you have more of a dangerous situation since, of course, a lot of people know how to defend themselves and are more capable of doing so. Those little British blokes, they're like, poking each other. Americans have different ways of means, which creates even more of a dangerous situation, especially with how local populations are kind of turned against each other. Now, you add that to the possibility of a looming bigger conflict that's just about to pop off inside of the Middle East with the Chicago Democratic National Convention that is coming in just a few days from now, which a lot of people believe will be just as chaotic as the 1968 one. As in America, race politics is, of course, becoming more and more mainline, where we are still discussing the race and ethnicity of the current, if not replaced, Democratic nominee that a lot of people are questioning if she's black or if she's Indian, not if she's capable or actually going to be good at her job. And when you have people that are kind of hyper-focused on race rather than merit, it's another kind of hallmarker of this kind of race-obsessed culture that is becoming more and more weaponized against each other. Now, you add that to the fact that in just a few days from now, we are going to have a new president of the United States and a group of Americans that are most likely going to be representing half the country that are not going to be very happy about that. Now, let's just be honest here. If Donald Trump wins, the possibility of civil unrest, especially in major urban environments in the United States, escalates dramatically. And it just takes this kind of larger pendulum swing to get out of complete control with moment after moment of just reckless violence and hatred and action against each other as fellow Americans that could also spiral us out of control and lead us down an entire pathway that is absolutely freaking disastrous. Now, you add that to the fact of the U.S. government literally having a huge track record of arming, funding, training radical Islamists, as even just recently, the U.S. government just accidentally sent the Taliban $239 million in assistance. You add that to the fact of what the United States did in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and you really have an absolute crazy situation. You add that to what's happening in Ukraine, specifically, where a lot of the weapons, a lot of the advanced military hardware just kind of poofs in air, just goes missing, just isn't delivered. Just as the soldiers there are reporting a lack of kind of resources, as the United States keeps funneling billions and billions and billions and billions of your money there, as those weapons go missing, as the borders wide open, as governments are taking your money and using it to, of course, import a huge, large swath of new people. And yep, you're following the same kind of recipe for disaster that Europe played into, that we're playing into right now. And this is why I think Elon Musk is right. And I think civil war is inevitable. And that's a sad reality that we're all dealing with, because can't we all just frickin' get along? Right? And if you think we could get along, share this video with your friends and family members. But seriously, can we not just all get along? And it's okay to have your own religion, your own practices, as long as you follow the non-aggression principle and you don't hurt or steal or take from others. If we just had simple things like that, as I would argue, the governments here, the NGOs, the United Nations organizations that, of course, import a lot of these people, that lie to a lot of these people, that are screwed over, that are just sent into this kind of cog of the machine of the corporate international sector, as they're told to work all the jobs that pay them absolutely less than they would to the average American, as they're told, hey, we'll give you a little bit of handouts here, but then you're going to be on your own in a little bit, as we're building up and incentivizing a larger welfare system that, of course, takes from the productive, as social media is just showing one point of the larger kind of strife here. We do have to wonder, where is this all headed? And it's headed towards disaster. We should all be able to get along with each other, and I think we would if it wasn't for powerful individuals that I think are pinning up us against each other, so we fight each other instead of realizing that there's some really sinister individuals out there that are incentivizing us to do this, so we don't realize that they kind of exist. And that's just my own kind of individualistic opinion and perspective. And if you appreciated it, share it. Again, and because you do, every time you share, Atlas gets one treat. Good job, Atlas.
We gave Atlas that treat by sharing, it seems. All right, so I don't think the problem with people is the non-aggression principle. Respectfully submitted, I think many of us are non-aggressive. We're not conducting violence as a means to support ourselves. We're not the problem. What happens is we who are non-aggressive sometimes lack assertiveness, because the non-aggression is a part, but if we continue to tolerate plunder by intraspecific kleptoparasites, then we're going to continue to have these kind of immune system problems. Now, if the border of a country is like the skin on your body, you want the border protected. You want the border not letting in foreign radical Islam, for instance, that might be groomed by our good Anglo-American establishment partners. Okay. And then the other problem is, you've heard about replacement migration. I've heard about replacement migration. We don't talk about it because it's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't exist. You're not supposed to know about such things. The official narrative is you must be racist talking about replacement migration. However, you could become unracist and just become educated by typing it into a browser. As I did, you could type in UN replacement migration 2001. Like a good cooking show, I have already baked it for you. If you go to this first result where they cannot provide a description of this page right now, you might find something inconvenient to all those narratives, because here's the document on replacement migration. And it's a thing. And they're swapping out populations on the planet for the past 25 years, 23 years, if you're going to be pedantic. Okay. So it exists. It's a real thing. And when you combine it with radical Islam, and some of those people moving into this country might not be so friendly, that's an issue. But there's a bigger issue, because we also had this phenomenon a couple years ago. You guys might remember this. You might not. You might still be traumatized. Some of you might have a little Stockholm syndrome. There was this thing, the Great Reset. Remember that during the COVID, they had this plan and they're going to reset everything. Part of that's the migration issue that we were just talking about. But I wanted to point out this word reset, because everyone, you didn't look it up because you think you know what it means already. Should we look it up? I think we should look it up. I've had this book sitting here for the past 3 episodes, but we've been a little busy to cover such things. And I think this episode affords us the time and place to look up this little word called reset, because my friend Martin said, I heard that reset has a different meaning. And if you look it up in the Black's Law Dictionary, it would say something to the effect of what we're about to read. And I was, as I say, incredulous, which is one of my greatest learning capacities, not believing. I said, nah, they wouldn't do that to us. They wouldn't go using funny words on that. So let's see if I can get this in here. An act or instance of knowingly receiving stolen goods. That's their great reset. They are actively, knowingly receiving our stolen goods. I think the proof is in the great transfer of wealth during COVID, where all those new billionaires were minted and they got all their new billions and people became the new richest people in the world. Remember that during COVID, while everyone was locked down and struggling and getting their places, shut down, and everybody was in fear? These people were resetting your system. That's Black's Law Dictionary. That's the legal definition. You might want to just open that for consideration. It's a good cocktail party talking point, really get a little livelihood and substantial consciousness going in that party. So anyway, Scott, was that on your radar?
That wasn't. Wow, that's amazing. I haven't spent much time in Black's Law. It's one of those things where it's tough for me. That's the one rabbit hole I haven't gone down, like the I don't want to say sovereign citizen is going to get in trouble every time, but you know what I'm talking about. And it's like my brain just instantly shuts off. I need to overcome that and kind of dive in a little bit more. But that's shocking. That's absolutely shocking, because it is the biggest. We witnessed the biggest theft, the biggest reset in the history of mankind over the last few years, and it's still going on. And it's so interesting, the obvious observation is like each one of these major instances where they take our rights, take our money, it's all predicated by civil unrest. And it's a common tactic that always gets done, whether they're overthrowing whether you're overthrowing governments or whatnot. It's like I even remember before COVID, like it was you remember like the Yellow Vest riots and Hong Kong, and it was all popping up all over the world. Like this is starting to happen all over Europe, and they're like, COVID, shut that down. But it's
COVID also gave them the excuse for mass surveillance projects and all these different trust passes and freedom passes, basically. And we're going to get to a clip later on it's the Y-Files new release. It was about Bilderberg, but really what they do is they project the future that's being created. And it's way more dystopic than just social credit score scary films that we've watched here before. Although, if you want to see the episode of Grand Theft World where we talked about the social credit scores, it was called No Dark Corner. So you go to clipgenie.gtw.com.
GTW.clipgenie.com.
Oh, sorry. GTW.clipgenie.com. And you search No Dark Corner, and you're going to see where we already have looked at the dystopian view of the technocrat future. Then compare that to what you're going to see in the Y-Files last night or later tonight, because AJ, he outdid himself once again. So we'll get to that. Awesome. We'll get to that. It's foreshadowing.
That's awesome. Damn, I just had something on the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry.
That's right. Boomerang it and it'll come back to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had so many notes from that whole thing. Like, it's just, let me see if it's in my notes here. But, oh, that's what it was. Okay. So that one speech that the British Prime Minister gave, I listened to that earlier, I think on No Agenda, one of the other shows I was listening to. And, I wish he would have kept playing it because it led into his commentary on the social credits. The social credit pre-crime. So that was the big mandate that the Prime Minister declared at some point in that speech, where he's like, and therefore we're going to establish a national police agency, and we're going to ramp up all the surveillance, and we're going to institute these pre-crime measures using social
you're talking about V for
surveillance.
Vendetta?
Yeah. And so I'm like, it's like,
it was
wow.
right after the virus. It's
funny how that happens, how this contrived civil unrest happens. And I mean, they have legitimate reason to be upset, you know what I mean? But it's like George Floyd, the whole thing. Like it's these contrived situations that get magnified, amplified, divided, like just the rhetoric of far right. So as soon as they say far right, then people automatically pick a side, and it gets inflamed to the point where they're willing to get out in the streets and fight each other over it.
Well, like the Hegelian view of history is that history ended when they started manufacturing it. And they manufacture it according to their needs. So it's not even like they need to make a situation for their mechanism to work. They can just report about a situation in a certain way. So things don't even actually have to happen in reality that way. They can just frame the story. All they needed was some guy in that situation with the cop to make that George Floyd situation like pop, right? But situations like that go on all the time, all over the place, because there's a lot of people in this country, 300 and some million people. There's a lot of people. So there are other instances, and they pick and choose what to make a big deal out of, right? There can be riots and fires on federal buildings and it's no big deal, or they can say it's an armed insurrection and it's January 6th. But one of them just happened last week, and no one even talks about it, right? So Trump talked about it in one of his speeches. They spray painted all the marble with red paint that can never come out of the limestone, all this other stuff that went on. We don't have time to cover, but there's a lot going on in America right now. This is an interesting point in history.
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures, they're hosting videos, they're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World Podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.